Good morning. Welcome to the final Breakfast Club of the season. Everyone's heard me say this is the final X video for this whole week, but this is obviously, yes, the final Breakfast Club. And I am joined by Neale this morning, who is on his free hit. So going to reveal his free hit draft. How are you feeling ahead of the deadline tomorrow?
Um, Undecided on a lot of things, as we'll discuss in a second. I think I'm getting there with my free hit draft. It's a lot more settled than it was when we first discussed it earlier in the week. But yeah, I think so much hinges on um, the possibility of leaks. I know they're not always above board, but it would be a massive help tomorrow. I think if we got any pointers. I think tonight, the good thing is with it being a Sunday deadline, I've got tonight, which is like a night off for me, really, because normally on a Friday, I'm doing the team news. I'm doing all sorts. I'm getting ready for doing stuff for the site, and then trying to do my own team as well. So at least tonight, I can dedicate an entire evening to looking through the stats and seeing if there's anything I've overlooked. Maybe this video will help me talk things out as well, and then finalize that free hit team. Which I'm not entirely sure that this is so much of an advantage this week. I know it's a good thing to have, and you look at it. I'm not sort of taking it for granted, but I think there's so many other good fixtures this week that people are probably set up quite well for this round of matches anyway. And I don't think free hit's going to make the difference between me finishing in the top 10k and not, for example. I just only hope it's enough for like a green arrow and some respectable rank.
What
But
rank are you
yeah,
at now? What rank are you at for
20,
this?
24k. So it's still decent. You know, I may have settled for that at the start of the season in terms of where do you want to be going into the final game week. But I was sort of top 5k at the start of the game week 30, and it's just been disaster really. I mean, I've just drifted. I've seen so many other people making huge leaps, like Az has come from nowhere really, obviously with Antonio and Sterling. But I've just gone the other way. I'm just thinking like a stone, just doing the Nottingham Forest really. Just I had it in my grasp, and then right at the last moment, it's all slipped away. But we'll see what we can do in the final game. I've had some success stories before. One of my triple captain Kane for his hat trick a couple of seasons ago against Hull, and that like let me 75,000 places. So if I can emulate that, obviously not 75,000 places, but if I can match that achievement, then I'll be very very happy.
Yeah, that would be pretty damn huge. Yeah, I think free hit. I mean, some people I keep seeing saying like free hit's a disadvantage, as if like you have to change your whole team. It's definitely not. Of course, it's always an advantage to have a chip in hand. But yeah, I know what it's like. It's because I think when I play free hit, you always feel like you've got to change the whole squad. When it's a blank game
Yeah,
week, that's easy because none of your players are playing. But you're right, like the teams with good fixtures, Liverpool, Man City, even Man United, arguably, which we'll talk about.
all yeah.
They're all in everyone's teams anyway. So you got obviously the option of probably getting a better defense, I would say, and maybe switching some of those players around as well. Don't be afraid to do that. I already see someone asking about in the chat. Can you discuss, because obviously you're on the free hit, the dangers of dropping Fernandes? So we are going to talk about that. We're going to go through a few just quick things on Man City, Man United. Obviously Man City are just the talk of the town this game week. Goals imminent and stuff like that. And then we'll do kind of the team reveals at the end like we did last week. So let's just kick off with Man City, which I feel like with the Scoutcast and everything, we've just talked about Man City every single week for the last 7 game weeks because it's just been such a huge part of FPL given their fixtures. So going into this game week, I would say that few people having doubts over Jesus. David Silva is now kind of top dog. It almost feels like people are expecting hat-tricks out of him. Mahrez has kind of been forgotten, I would say. What's your kind of general thinking on the kind of best 3 as we move into this and kind of like, I don't know, David Silva, are you expecting like one last swan song from him?
There'll be a swan song in terms of an appearance, and I'm sure he'll get plenty of minutes within that. I would not be expecting him to match, for example, Sterling's haul. I know he can do it. I think he got, what was it, 17 points quite recently. But those sort of monster scores are few and far between. He's actually done all right for double-digit hauls this season, Silver. I know he's not been afforded as much game time, but towards the start of the campaign, he had 4 in the opening 9 game weeks. They were all sort of 10, 11 points. So he gets to that double-digit haul and doesn't often push on from there. That's 17 points against Newcastle. His only real, like, huge score this season. I know he got 13 against Bournemouth, but he'll seldom be pushing for sort of 20 points, which I know is optimistic anyway. Those scores come along once or twice a season. But I don't think it's just a sentimental pick this week. I've discussed this before. It's not just nostalgia. It's a common sense as well, because he didn't play a minute against Watford. And if you're trying to second guess Pep, which I know is a dangerous game, then you'd think that he's going to start this one and, get a decent amount of minutes in it. Yes, there might be some sort of token withdrawal later on to get him not even a round of applause because there's no one there, but a symbolic gesture of him coming off. I don't know if you'll get the John Terry Guard of Honor. He doesn't strike me as that sort of type, but I do think there's a lot of sense in picking him, regardless of whether it be in his last game, Premier League game, because he's not only a very likely starter in my eyes, he's actually done very well since the restart in terms of home appearances. He doesn't often get played away, I think, because of his aging limbs, perhaps not quite up to being able to play as dynamic as Pep likes away from home, but at home against a sort of cannon fodder. 10.5 points per game at the Etihad since the restart when he started. So those games have been against Bournemouth, Newcastle, Burnley and Arsenal. Now he blanked against Arsenal, but he holed against the other three, and it's that type of opposition that Man City's facing this weekend. So he is in my free hit squad. We'll talk about that more later on. His price is great for me as someone who's got low team value. I do think there are probably better options on paper if you strip away the final game week feel around him, the sort of circumstances. But he's by no means a bad pick, just because it's his final game. I do think he's capable of getting something. 7.4 million and a fairly low ownership in the top 10k. I think it's around about the 10% mark. 10.8% he is. Yeah. So of course you'd expect that figure to go up because these are last week's numbers. But I do think I'll have him in as one of my three. Perhaps in my case it's more to do with budget because my team value is pretty appallingly low. But I'm quite happy to have him in. I don't know. Are you going for him this week?
Probably not. It really did. For me, it's a bit different because I'm not on a free hit, so it depends on.
Yeah.
It depends what I want to do about Sterling or Salah or Mane. Basically, if I go for Sterling, I won't have David Silva. If I go for Salah, I probably will. I've got some stats on screen. So this is since restart. So this is XG non-penalty. So Jesus is top, Sterling second. David Silva is fifth behind Foden and Mahrez. And I've actually got because a few people have said, well, recent form is much better for David Silva. So I brought that up as well. And I've ordered this one by expected goal involvement. And David Silva's fifth behind Jesus, Mahrez, De Bruyne and Sterling. Now, obviously, you've got to take price into account. David Silva's way cheaper than the likes of Sterling, Jesus and De Bruyne. But for Mahrez, the price is a bit closer. I think it's 1.1 million difference. So what do you make of those two? Because I feel like Mahrez has kind of been forgotten about. Because the last two games, to be fair, he hasn't started. I looked at his XGI per 90 for the last four games, which is 1.08. So for every 90 minutes he arguably could have had, he's getting a return every game essentially. Whereas David Silva's 0.5. So it's like a return every other game. So what do you make of Mahrez? Do you think he's being forgotten about a little bit?
I do, and it's someone I'll discuss about later on because again, if I've got Sterling as a given or De Bruyne, and then Silva as a second option, then the third pick is basically between someone like Mahrez and Jesus. And again, hit the heart one about money, but that's a saving of about 1.3 million for me. Mahrez actually since the restart, which is what I'm looking at in the table I've got in front of me, his XGI or minutes per XGI is almost exactly the same as Sterling's. It's just Sterling's has been more clinical with his shots and had the better look in terms of players putting away his chances. And Mahrez has got one assist from an XA of 1.65. And he's underachieving Mahrez based on the XGI delta, which is not something that Sterling's doing. It's not something that De Bruyne's doing. Even Jesus, who's been as profligate as he has, he's still overachieving based on what Opta would have expected. Now, we would expect that of the better players because they are, they cost these big bucks for a reason. They're able to convert half chances into goals. And you'd normally expect that of Mahrez as well. So I think because it's such a short data pool, really, you'd expect that XGI delta to rise to a plus. So I do think he's been overlooked. Obviously, it hinges a lot on whether he's going to start, and hopefully we'll get a heads up on that. He doesn't. One of the downsides to him is that he sometimes doesn't stay on the pitch for the entire 90. So I think since the restart, 2 90-minute runouts. Now I know there's 5 substitutions now, and that is the case for a lot of players, but he's regularly getting hauled off like on the hour. So Arsenal, Burnley, Southampton, Newcastle, it was a bit later, 74 minutes. He all got taken off then. Now in some of those games he'd already done the damage, but he's someone who Pep seems to withdraw with regularity, and that would be my only concern. You'd think maybe David Silva, if it's a direct comparison, he would get a bit more in terms of game time. But I do think he's going under the radar. I think Norwich are quite susceptible down the flanks. I think they've got 2 quite attack-minded fullbacks, and they've conceded more chance from the flanks than any other team since the restart. That's hardly a big shock because they're so woeful at the moment. So yeah, I'm looking at Mahrez, and again, fairly low in terms of top 10k, 15.4% ownership. I wouldn't expect that figure to rise that much because I think folk will be prioritising a move for Sterling, probably David Silva as well, free hit or otherwise. So I think he's a decent differential shout. I know a differential is sort of classically 5% or less, but I think in terms of top 10k, I'll cite an article you wrote, Andy, recently. I think that's still enough to get you a nice green arrow if he holds, because you got to think of it like, well, 85% of managers don't own him. So if I do, then he's a nice little differential.
Yeah, I completely agree on the differential thing. We won't get into that too much, but I don't think this whole it has to be less than 5% thing is that to me, most differentials are under 5%. They're either not there for long because they're actually really good options anyway, or they're just big punts. I think a player that's like 20% or less in the top 10k, that's 4 out of every 5 managers don't own them. That's huge for me. So I think Mahrez is a big differential. I see a few people in the chat saying similar thing. Are you worried about the 60 minutes? He even got brought off around 60 minutes in the FA Cup as well. Wasn't having a great game against Arsenal. So it's a little bit concerning. The only kind of flip side I could say maybe for a counter argument to that is, if anyone's going to play 90, he's had enough rest to be able to do that if they want him to play 90. But yeah, it is a little bit of a concern. I do think he's probably gone under the radar a little bit. And in a few games ago, when he was getting kind of 60-ish minutes, I think he was a bit unlucky not to score more. As an owner, I felt a bit unlucky at the time. I think he's getting overlooked a bit, but I can't really sit here and argue against David Silva. It just looks like everything's pointing to getting something to do. I think his last couple of goals have been free kicks, so he's not really getting into the box very much. Like last 4 game weeks, he's had 3 shots in the box, which is one more than Kevin De Bruyne, by the way. Who, unless he's getting any assists, I'm not really seeing many goals, especially if he's giving up penalties at the moment. So, obviously Sterling's the number one. Jesus, I've not. I know you touched on him there. I'm an owner. I'm not really concerned about him, to be honest. I think he's going to get chances. You're just obviously hoping that this is the day where he puts them away and doesn't have another game like Watford. So, David Silva, I can see why, but I think the thing for Mahrez for me is, I think if he's in a position where he can pass to Sterling or shoot, he's going to shoot. Like, he's that type of player. He's not Kevin De Bruyne who's going to be looking for that assist record, that pass. And let's remember as well, there's Real Madrid to come in the Champions League. These players are going to want to play in that. So it's not a case of getting Sterling 20 goals, which really means nothing. It's good for him, but it's not going to be golden boot territory. So, they've got their own kind of part to play to try and get involved in the Champions League. So there's a lot of narratives about this game. It'd be interesting to see what ends up happening. Whether David Silva gets his hat-trick, Sterling gets his, it'll be interesting to see. But we were saying yesterday as well, you don't necessarily think it's going to be like a 7-8 goal kind of game. You think maybe more 3-4, right?
I think so, yeah. I these games always get your excitement and your hopes up, because you think it's going to be a quick score. It very rarely materialises. As you said yesterday, you can still see it being a comfortable victory, but I would be talking more about the 3-4, maybe 5 mark than something ridiculous, like a Premier League record. But that would be enough. I mean, I'd take a 4-0 now, I think, providing
Absolutely.
there was assists and goals shared around. Yeah, you made a good point there about Mars. I saw someone on Twitter saying yesterday, arguably what you want for this game is the most selfish players. You want Morris to be taking a lot of shots against that Norwich backline. So, and Morris is definitely, one of the most ball hogging players in that City team. So, yeah, I'm close to getting him in my free hit team, I think.
Be interesting to see. We'll show you a free hit team in a bit. I might go into this week with Sterling, Jesus, and Mahrez, and I'm pretty happy that I think they get the ball in the box. They're shooting, they're not passing. So I will really quickly say, just in case anyone missed it, Mark, and I feel like I don't need to use his surname. It's a bit like Cher. When I say Mark, people know who I mean. Was on the FPL show yesterday. And he was talking about this game, and he actually said the same thing. He doesn't think this is necessarily going to be a massive, massive score. He thinks Norwich actually defended well against Chelsea, and that Man City don't necessarily need to just go for a 9-10 kind of goal finish, which obviously is very unlikely anyway. I don't think he's got any Man City players, and he's captaining Pulisic. So there you go. If you want a kind of differential option, that's what. And look, I don't like Pulisic as a captain option, but who am I to argue with Mark? So
well, exactly.
Yeah, so there you go. That's what Mark thinks anyway. For anyone that missed it on the FPL show, let's quickly go to the other side of Manchester. Let's talk about Manchester United quickly enough. A lot of people saying looking tired. I fully agree. I cannot believe we only made 2 subs in the last game. It seemed absolutely ridiculous. I appreciate that our non-first 11 is not anywhere near as good as the first 11, but fresh legs could have helped that in that West Ham game, I think. What do you make of that? Do you think there's enough to go on there, or do you think the Leicester game is kind of good enough to get something from, get FPL points from?
I do. I think I mentioned this yesterday in the team news video. It's a difficult game to predict, is because on the one hand, it could be a cagey affair. I think especially at first. I think while they suss out what's happening, and if word comes across from elsewhere, Chelsea are playing Wolves, a draw might be enough for both teams. But of course, both games are going on simultaneously, and it'll be hard to keep track of that. My feeling, having watched Leicester against Spurs and Bournemouth prior to that, is that United could get a lot of joy against that back line. But surely now Rodgers has learned from what happened at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Now, Mourinho kind of showed United the way to do it. So to sit back and let Leicester have possession, let them push up a high line in defence and then hit them on a counter-attack. I would have thought Rodgers had learned from that. So, for example, whether he wants to switch back to a back 4 or whether he brings in James Justin instead of Ryan Bennett as a right-sided centre-half, gives a bit more pace at the back. Maybe he'll urge him to sit a bit deeper, given the threat of Martial and Rashford. But I've got a feeling if Leicester need to chase this game, which they might at some point, and it seems like a very good chance they will, because a draw will be enough for Chelsea and it'll be for United. So there'll come a point, I think, during the game where they have to go for United. And that might not be from the off, but it'll come. And I think that, that could be the time when the likes of Martial and Rashford really exploit that back line, which is patched up without Pereira, without Chilwell, without Soyuncu. They've got a teenage wing back in Luke Thomas down the left. They might have Albrighton down the right. I know he can play on the other side as well. Could have 36-year-old Wes Morgan as the sort of middle centre half. Had Ryan Bennett, it was the worst of the lot against Spurs. Ideally, if I knew Ryan Bennett was going to start, then having seen how he backed off against Son and Kane for the first and third goals, that's like prime Rashford, that is, because that came from the left of the Spurs attack. And I think Rashford would get a lot of joy against Bennett if I knew he was up against him, which of course we might not know about until the team sheets are released. So I don't think, if it was a full strength Leicester team, because they've been actually quite solid defensively this season, then I'd be more keen on losing me My United assets. At the moment, I'm keeping at least one in, certainly at least one playing option in, because as we'll discuss, Brandon Williams is a nice little bench fodder option for this week. But I'm loath to go in without them, I think, for this fixture. I think traditionally the real go-firsts in the end of the season are the dead rubbers, and this isn't one of them. But I do think there can be joy to be had, I think, from that Leicester back line if the game pans out as expected, in which case Leicester are needing a win, and if Ryan Bennett's playing, especially, and where's Morgan? So I guess there are a lot of unknown variables at this point, which I'd like to sort of nail down before I make a decision. Of course, the first of those you're not going to know until the game starts. I mean, if Leicester get an early goal, then they're going to sit back on it. But I do. If you're not on a free hit and you've got Man United assets, I wouldn't be unduly worried about this fixture, given Leicester's shortage of options in defence and the fact that they're going to have to probably, you'd think, go for it at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the defence is just looking extremely taped up right now. I did check the stats for their defence. They haven't been awful, to be fair.
No.
They're kind of middling. They're not the worst. They're not the best. They're kind of somewhere in the middle, even with these kind of suspensions and injuries. So they haven't been, as awful as I might have thought. But they did concede 3 really quick goals to Spurs. I'm trying to remember now. I think in the first half they were playing, was it 5 at the back against Spurs? And I think they changed to 4 in the second half, and they didn't concede. I think all 3 goals came in the first half, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah.
So they did change it up, and they did look a bit tighter. Whether or not that was Spurs kind of dropping off a bit, kind of we got our 3 goals, that'll do us. I don't think they've been that bad, but it is such a patched up defence, and they are going to have to probably get something from that game and maybe go for the win at some point, which is going to help Rashford. I've got some stats on the screen. Like Rashford for XGI last 4 is the top for Man United. I think he's actually top for since restart. Actually, he's kind of obviously started off quite slow, but he's been getting better and better. So I quite like him. Fernandes, interesting enough, has had 4 big chances in the last 4. That's the same as Rashford and 2 more than Martial. Martial's XGI is 2.25. He's had 5 returns, so you could say he's maybe overperforming just a little bit. But I'm the same. I'm kind of similar to what you just mentioned. I got Bruno Fernandes and Martial on my team. I'm not saying I'll definitely have them for the last game, but I wouldn't be worried about having them either. I don't think there's no way you should be forcing these players out. They've also had a bit more of a rest. I think the FA Cup game was really bad for a couple of reasons. One, we played 5 at the back. I'm not convinced we're going to do that against Leicester at all, because obviously once Bailly got injured, we just switched back to a back 4. And also, we had 48 hours less rest than Chelsea in a time period where there's already a limited kind of rest period, given everything that's gone on. Whereas there's a bit more time now between the last game and this one. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. I do think it'll be tough, though, and it could be cagey because you go a goal down early and then suddenly Leicester just sit back for the whole game. Yeah. Yes, Man United have broken down teams before, but I don't think they're necessarily Man City and Liverpool all of a sudden. So it depends how you think that game's going to go. I personally think Man United have still got goals in them in that one, and it's worth keeping. But I think captaincy and stuff, absolutely not. If I was on a free hit, I don't think I'd have. I don't probably think I'd have more than one attacker. So yeah,
I think that's it. Yeah, I think it's if the game pans out in a certain way, then they're great options. But we don't know that. We can't tell that in advance. So it's I guess you just sort of playing the odds in that regard by. As you said, I'm going with one attacker at the moment, and then sort of dropping another one and avoiding the triple. But I do think like decent options this week.
Yeah, all you need is like another David De Gea mistake early on, like the first 5 minutes, and then suddenly the whole game is just different. United are suddenly panicking, maybe a few heads drop, and it's a bit of a worry. But obviously that's something we just cannot predict. Let's move on. So differentials, I'm going to say again, you're going to look at these players that I've got up on the screen, and a lot of people say they're not differentials. But for me, like I said, anyone kind of 20, 30% or less in the top 10k at this stage is differential enough for me. Is there any players you're kind of eyeing up or you think could be good options that are maybe a little bit different? So I'm not talking... Obviously, we talked about Man City already. We know that Mahrez and David Silva are quite low. But what about outside of kind of Man City? Is there anyone that you'd be looking at?
Yeah, another team who I guess folk are losing assets from in order to fund a move for City players. Liverpool, who again are up against a real patched up defence in Newcastle. We discussed this yesterday on the team news video. But, I mean, even Salah, who is, I think, their most owned player in the top 10k, even he's, apart from Alexander-Arnold, even he's only at 50% or 43% ownership, 50% effective ownership. And I don't think that's going to rise too much ahead of Gameweek. Yeah, it might even drop. So he in himself is, I guess, a differential for over half of the top 10k. I'm looking even below than that, though. Andrew Robertson, 6% ownership. And Mane is less than 10% as well. So those two players, I'm kind of revealing my free hit squad here, but those two players I'm I'm eyeing up with serious consideration for Gameweek 38. Now, Robertson has been quietly taking a lot more corners since the restart. I think he's almost on a par with Alexander-Arnold. And Mane is someone who's had the second most amount of headed chances this season. Now, why is that relevant? Well, Newcastle are susceptible to aerial balls. Have conceded the most headed chances since the restart, something that's not just a short-term trend. That's been the case for this season and last season, I believe, as well. They are vulnerable to crosses. We're down to one centre-half. I know we're discussing the merits of or the sort of disadvantages of that, because if you're playing 4 at the back, that's only one missing centre-half, as you said yesterday. But we weren't playing 4 at the back. We're playing 3 at the back against Brighton. So either side of Fernandes were Emil Kraft and Danny Rose, 2 fullbacks. Kraft's no sort of, short man or anything like that, but he's not renowned for his aerial ability, and he himself is an injury doubt for this game. So I think there could be a lot of joy in the air for Liverpool, and hence why I'm looking at Mane over Salah, not just because he's cheaper either. And I do think, I know they haven't quite looked fully at it since they clinched their title, but my reservations about them would be more about clean sheets than goals, I think. And I don't think Newcastle's going to offer that much going forward, apart from St. Maximin, because we're not exactly renowned for scoring them at the other end, especially if we move back to a back 5, which we might for this game. We did against Brighton, and it's been in a 4-2-3-1 that we've got a lot of our goals recently. So if we're back to the Benitez tactics of before, wing back system, I think there's a good chance of Liverpool in what is a dead rubber, one of those end of season dead rubbers that we like in terms of goals. We can think back to Man United v West Brom. We can think about Tottenham v Leicester, Palace v Bournemouth last year, wasn't it, the 5-3? So a lot of these goal fests on the final day are where there's nothing riding on the games. And judging by our injury list, Newcastle's injury list, I'm quietly fancying Liverpool, I think, for this. And I'm currently on a double up for my free hit squad. So yeah, I quite like them for this. I know there's downside. I think Salah's maybe been a little bit off it. Certainly his radar's been misaligned in the past 2. But I think just it's a last week punt really, and I think a lot of underlying stats you can almost disregard to an extent in Game Week 38. Because it's just such a madcap day, isn't it? We often get like more goals than the season average. And I'm just looking at Newcastle's available roster and the fact that we've been in quite bad form the past 3 or 4 game weeks. And Mane and Robertson, I think, are 2 decent sub 10% top 10k differentials.
I really like those shouts. I will respond to that and give my own opinions in just a second. I should say, Chris McGowan, I think it's the Chris McGowan, is in the chat right now, who's currently number 1 in the world. I think he maybe jokingly asked us what he should do. I don't know if me and you, I don't know if you really want me and Neale right now to be giving you ideas. I'm just looking at his team now. So Mane in there. I don't think he's got a free hit for this week, but he's got triple captain, hasn't he? So be interested to see who that goes on. Sterling already in that, and Foden. So that's the 2 Man City players he owns. Mane, like you just mentioned there. Bruno Fernandes, and Rashford are the 2 Man United attackers with Ings and Chris Wood. So I'm gonna money in the bank. I don't know. Antonio's on the bench as well. So you got 8 attackers. See, it's a bit tricky. If Foden doesn't start, I don't know what I would do there. I'm not going to give you any advice because I haven't really thought about it at all. I've only literally just looked at the team, and plus you're number 1. I'm like 170k, so I don't think it would feel right to do that. But good luck this week. Only 2 points ahead of second place, so that is going to be absolutely tight. And if you think you're stressing right now because you've got a free hit, I'm not talking about you, Neale, but like people in general, because you've got a free hit and you're trying to get into the top 10k. Imagine being 2 points ahead in the race for the whole thing. So good luck, Chris. In terms of what you just said, I completely agree. The only thing, Mane's always kind of, in a stats perspective, always behind Salah, it feels like. He's always less shots, less big chances. It doesn't usually matter. But in the last 4, it is quite a bit of a difference. So Salah's XGI is 4.64 and Mane's 1.65. He has played a little bit less, but not a huge amount. But if you really want to go for it and try and chase, Mane is definitely the one. He's much lower owned than Salah. Antonio, by the way, is the highest XGI still for the last 4. Now, obviously, he's got that Norwich game in there. But I still think he's a good option for the last week. And I think he's still only owned by 14% or something around that. So he's still quite low. I think he's a good option. And then if we're talking about a different team altogether, I think Kane and Son maybe. I definitely at this stage prefer Kane to Son. That's not to say Son can't do something on the last day. We know what he's like. His returns this season are actually incredible, to be fair. I think probably gone massively under the radar. I think he's got something like 23 returns in 29 or something ridiculous like that. So he's had an incredible season. But right now it does look like Kane is possibly slightly ahead of him. They're both really low on. I think they're both less than 10% or around 10%. Yeah. So again, Kane got a 13-pointer. So some people that weren't in the top 10k will jump into that now. And he will be higher. And obviously people have transferred him in. But from what we've got to go on, I think both of those look like punts this week. Not punts, sorry, like good differentials. So you don't have to go completely crazy for a differential, as we said. Richarlison's one I've seen touted around. I actually mentioned him on a video yesterday. Although looking at this, 0.5 XGI last 4 game weeks. That is poor. That's really poor. But it's Bournemouth, and any relegation team could be in a position at any stage tomorrow where they have to go for goals. Yeah. And suddenly that could leave them exposed. So I've not necessarily been backing Everton attack recently, but against Bournemouth, who like to ship goals anyway, and who have to go for it, that might not be the worst punt. And just like you said, ignore the stats and just realise it's the last day and anything can happen.
I agree. I totally agree because, Everton's attack, it's been more Everton as a team than Richarlison individually. They've just been so poor recently in terms of creating chances. But Sigurdsson, when I picked out actually for the final game, is a real markup differential. 0% owned, not one of the top 10k owns him. Now, he's just not been the Sigurdsson of all this season, but he's been playing under Ancelotti in like a 4-4-2, like as a central midfielder, often as the sort of defensive one at times. But last week, they played in a 4-2-3-1. He was back in a number 10 role, created 3 chances, which is the most of anyone in that match. And as you said, I think this is a game where Bournemouth are going to need to go for it. They need a win at the very least. They might need a big win. So if they get news early on that, say, Villa's gone 1 or 2-0 up and they know they're going down, then they're there for the taking, really. The heads are naturally going to drop, I think. And I think you could do worse than looking at Everton. I think Richarlison's the obvious one. I'd be concerned about Calvert-Lewin because Ancelotti hinted that Keane might get a start this week. But Richarlison started in every match which he's been available for under Ancelotti, and he's got the form that Calvert-Lewin hasn't. I think he still scored 3 since the restart, even in that terrible team. So, yeah, not a bad shout, that Richarlison.
There you go. Really quickly before we go on to girls in it, then we will reveal the teams because I know that's what people are waiting for. A few people in the chat have said about Mane apparently not been seen in training. There's a tweet here from a verified, at least. I don't know how good the source is, but it's Anfield Watch, verified. And the Echo apparently have said that he was missing from yesterday's Melwood photos due to a slight medical issue. Thankfully for the Reds, it's not serious enough to make him a doubt for the game against Newcastle. He should be fine. Obviously, we'll look into that as well and see what the deal is. But for those that are saying it in chat, it looks like it might be okay, but we've kind of only just seen that while we're live, so we'll have to look into that a bit more afterwards. Yeah. Okay, goals imminent cricket. I'll just run through this. There's a few. I mean, Foden's still on there if he starts. I don't know if his finishing is maybe as good as some of the others, but he's getting into the good positions to get those goals. So if he starts, he could be an option. Even if he doesn't, you could still maybe hold on to him if you've got other transfers to do. Welbeck against Arsenal. I'm not convinced by that one, but again, Watford might have to go for it at some point. And the man we've just been talking about, which is why it's important to show this, is Mane is on here. Is on the goals imminent table. So he might be worth getting a look in. The goals imminent table's done well since lockdown as well. There's been a lot of players that have jumped off this. So Mane's on there. And Souček as well, actually. I think if you're looking for like if you're playing 3-4-3, you need a cheap midfielder. Off the top of my head, I don't think there's probably any better players than Souček right now. 4.8, playing against Villa. I've seen a lot of people saying he's the new Fellaini for Moyes. Which might be a bit of a kind of cliche, but it does look like that. Like the amount of games I've watched, like the Norwich game where Antonio scored 4, I don't know how Souček didn't score in that game. He's just bombing forward and getting into the box. So forget the defensive midfield tag. That is not how he plays for West Ham. Like he does get forward. So
14 shots in the box since the restart, which is more than Mane and De Bruyne and Son and Richarlison. So yeah, he's decent, especially from set players as well. I think he's a very good pick.
Yeah, really good one, that one. 4.8 million looks worth putting on, unless you're playing 3-5-2, of course. Although you could still go for him, I guess, and save some money. But that would be, it's a bit of a different call. Let's get to it anyway. Let's reveal your free hit. So this is your current draft up on screen.
Yes.
So the 3 Man City players, you kind of already guided us towards that. Mahrez, David Silva, Sterling. You got Martial as the lone Man United player. I should say, actually, no, sorry, you haven't got him as the lone player because you got Greenwood in there as well.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
Williams. Yeah, I think I've pretty much revealed half of my team already in the earlier chat, but obviously it looks weak in certain areas, especially at the back and up front. But that is to do with my low team value, which I've harped on about constantly throughout the season. I hit a boy with it again, but obviously you've got to have sacrifices somewhere if you're going for premium options, especially in midfield. So power 5 in the middle, up top. I think it's a straight choice between Kane and Aubameyang. I'll have another think about that later on. But I do like the fact that Kane's up against a Palace defence which have lost 7 in a row. They're without so many players: Cahill, Sacco, Van Aanholt. Possibly playing a central midfielder at the back as well. Arsenal, we're not quite sure how the FA Cup final is going to affect their team selection, and we saw what Arteta did in 36, and they looked well off the pace in midweek against Villa. So, yeah, the back, I guess that probably requires the most explanation. Robertson is obviously cheaper than Alexander-Arnold, and that 0.7, which I think it is now, makes a big difference to me because I am trying to scrabble around for savings, and I like his underlying stats. I think he's trumping Alexander-Arnold for chances created since the restart, and if he's got to share corners now, then I'm quite happy to have him over Alexander-Arnold. Aurier, I'm not convinced entirely on him, but again, Palace not renowned for scoring goals. I think since Benteke dropped out, I know he's maligned as a goal scorer himself, but I do think he's a bit of a battering ram, which Jordan Ayew certainly fed off. So I'm considering him. Everyone else is sub 4.5 million, including my goalkeeper. So Martinez at home to Watford. It'll be Peters out of that trio of budget defenders who would start. Williams would be the third sub bench for option, and then Branthwaite, who I think we can be fairly confident about starting because Holgate and Mina are out. He would be my emergency sub. Not a bad one because I think Everton at home to Bournemouth is a decent fixture, and I do think even if we do get some team news before the deadline, I do think it's obviously important to have at least one playing sub. It doesn't have to be a full bench because you're not in a very unlikely scenario. Am I going to need all 3 of my subs on the final day, especially with 5 substitutions happening in real life? So yeah, there's a few things that can change. So I guess I could downgrade Kane and have 2 more evenly priced forwards. So Ings, for example, maybe Wood alongside him, rather than Kane and one of Greenwood or Nketiah. Nketiah, possibly an option if I get the heads up that he's starting against Watford at home. I'm not entirely sure about starting Greenwood and Martial away at Leicester as much as what I've discussed earlier about Leicester's vulnerabilities. So I'm fairly, I wouldn't say settled on the core of that team, but I'm getting there. Certainly a lot closer than what I was on Monday when we first discussed it. And I guess it hinges on a City trio. I think it's basically my team is shaped around that. So if I know that Mahrez isn't starting, for example, then I could swiftly turn to Jesus instead. Same with Sterling. I mean, if there's any chance that he doesn't start, then he could be downgraded to De Bruyne. So I think I'll have a flow chart going on tomorrow morning of things to do if I get any kind of inclination that one of those 3 isn't starting, and I'll have backups set in motion to come in. But rip it apart, Andy. Go on. I know you're dying.
No, you laugh about the. I'll come on to the free hit team in general in a sec, but you laugh about the flow chart thing. Like, I'm not saying people have to go and create one of them, but again, I said it on a video yesterday. Generally, think you should have more than one plan, especially if you're on a free hit. So I'm not on a free hit, and I know how I can get Sterling if I want to do De Bruyne to Sterling, for example. I know there's lots of ways I can fund it, but there's 2 ways in particular I like. So they're both in my mind. But at the same time, if if, and I'm not convinced this is going to happen because he started the last 8 or 9 games, Jesus doesn't play and they play false 9, then suddenly I've got him, then and De Bruyne starts, and it's better to take out Jesus than De Bruyne. So I've got another plan for how I get Sterling in that scenario. So I'm kind of keeping my options open. And like I expected a full strength, like kind of back 4, front 3 for Liverpool, for Arsenal and Chelsea, and it happened. And I'm kind of expecting it for Newcastle as well, because they've had enough rest, and Klopp said before about not giving away places for the sake of it. So they've got enough rest and nothing to play for afterwards. But we could see a situation where he rotates one of the fullbacks, and then suddenly you need another plan there. You know, what if Trent doesn't start? Then suddenly I've got money to burn from getting rid of him. Flowchart maybe not, but I do think is worth having in the back of your mind. What if this player, and you can't do that for every single player, and there's no need. Like Kane's going to play, Kane's going to start. Yeah. And the Man United players, you can be pretty sure as well. But for City especially, I don't think it's I do expect a strong front 6, but you just don't know. In terms of the team, there's nothing really... I mean, there's loads of players you could say to replace, but you've got to take into account team value. So I definitely think Martinez is a better... If you're struggling for team value, is a better pick than Pope. Arguably, he's just as good anyway against Watford, and especially if you can cover that in defence. So Peter's there. Yeah. And I really like Aurier, actually. I don't think I can, if I make a defender change this week, I don't think I can stretch to him. But outside of the obvious Liverpool and Burnley defenders this week, I don't think there is a huge amount of other massively standout clean sheets, to be honest. I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any way you could look at them and say, that's definitely a clean sheet. But Crystal Palace, I think, for Spurs is a good one. And then, I've already said my piece on the Man City players. I think I got no issues with David Silva at all. I think sometimes you tweet a different opinion and people think... You just don't. I like David Silva. I think he's a good option this week, and maybe he will take a penalty. We just don't know. But I definitely like Mahrez if he starts. I think he's being overlooked, so I like that pick. And I'm not gone off Jesus, but I'll be honest. I've looked at how I could get Kane instead of Jesus this week and fund Sterling a different way. So I'm not against Kane instead of Jesus either. Greenwood, I guess, hasn't been fantastic recently, but at the same time, he enables so much money. I don't think he is a worse pick than anyone like Ings or Wood, because it's not just a straight race between the two of them. It's also what you can do with that extra money. So I don't see a huge issue. I think Robertson and Trent's a bit like Salah or Mane. Over the season, you'd have Trent and Salah probably, but on a single game week, both could outscore each other. You just don't know. So I don't think I can rip it apart. I don't think there's anything I dislike, to be honest. I don't, even if Nketiah starts, I've got him in my team. Even if he starts, I've got no faith in him at all. But he's just bench fodder for you, so it doesn't. It doesn't matter. So I'm sitting here trying to think of something I don't like. I don't think there is anything really. I mean, when I put a free hit draft together, it was very similar. Martial versus Fernandes. I know a lot of people are drawn to Martial. I don't know if that's necessarily going to play out the way people hope. Like on his day, Fernandes can get a huge score with set pieces and penalties. I like it. I got nothing to. I mean, you could make changes. Like you could have Rashford instead of Martial and change whoever, but you just make. Yeah, exactly. You could change them, but looking good. I think. I'll quickly show you my. Go on.
Yeah, go for it. I was going to say, if anyone's compiling their free hit team, just keep an eye on the price changes, because I think there's a couple more who could go down to 3.8 tonight. I think Button perhaps, and who was the other one? Is it Kilman? It's one of the 3.9 defenders who might drop. So if you're looking for more budget options, then just hang fire, and you might get some overnight. I think Mane might be destined to drop as well, so maybe don't bring him in until tomorrow morning if you're thinking about doing so.
I won't be happy if more players drop to kind of 3.8 and 3.9. It's just handing free hitters. They might get team news anyway, which just makes it even easier. Now they're getting price drops as well. It's just not fair to us non-free hitters. But yeah, you're right. And obviously make sure you don't put them in before they drop in price as well, because that is a rookie mistake I have done before for sure. I'll just bring up my team. Nowhere near as interesting because I don't have a free hit. Although I must say, when I look at this team, I'm pretty happy with it. The defense could be better, so I'm going to probably I don't want to play Egan because I'm playing Ings, so that leaves me with Seiss against Chelsea. So basically, like, I really quick, I'm probably going to do De Bruyne to Sterling and captain Sterling, even though I'm ranked low and I probably should go a bit different. I'm just going to go for the main man and captain him, and I don't know how I'm going to fund it. I'm either going to do Fernandes to Antonio or Martial to Antonio. I think I can afford it with either. Or I can do Maguire to a 4.1 like Lamptey, Branthwaite, who you mentioned as well, and play them instead. I'd almost take a little bit of a rank hit just to have that chance at Maguire finally scoring. To be honest, at this stage of this, I got nothing to gain or lose at this point anyway. I'm not going to get top 100k, I don't think. So I'll just bet on that. Maguire, imagine that 1-0 win, final day of the season. Maguire gets us Champions League against his old club. That's the dream. That's the narrative I've got in my head. Of course, he's going to concede to Vardy in 2 minutes and probably just get a yellow card. But the thought is there. So that's the way I could fund it. Otherwise, like if this is what I'm saying about other plans, if Jesus doesn't start, then I'll probably do Jesus and Fernandes or Jesus and Martial to like Wood, someone like Wood or Greenwood and Sterling, basically. So the key for my team is I'm getting Sterling in. Son I could drop. Son was like a 1 week punt I thought about dropping, but he's just such a differential. I just fancy keeping him in my team now. I don't think he's necessarily a much better option than Martial Fernandes, but they're both so highly owned. If I'm going to do some kind of green arrow chasing, I'm going to go for the one that's slightly different. So that's some. But yeah, my defence I don't like. But if I'm going to have to use my 2 free transfers to get Sterling, then I have to take a hit to do Sice to a Burnley defender. And I'm just not sure it's worth that, to be honest. I don't know if they've got that much upside. And the only other way I can fund it, De Bruyne to Sterling, is Maguire and Sice. So both of them to 2 Burnley defenders for a hit. Keep Fernandes, Martial and Son. So that's something I'm looking at too. It would be a hit, but I feel like I can tell myself it's okay because I'll be captaining Sterling. So then obviously I'm betting on a Burnley clean sheet like everyone else. So yeah, I mean, what do you think about taking? Like, I'm okay with hits in the final game week. I know you're obviously betting that they do it in that game week. There's none of this. Well, it's over a 3 or 4 game week period.
Yeah.
But for defenders like Sice, I know it's Chelsea, but would you take a hit for a Burnley defender? They'd have to get more than their clean sheet, right?
Well, that's it, and they don't often do that. I know Peters did last week, and Bardsley's chipped him the odd assist, but they're not really. If you look at their numbers, they don't get forward that much. Peters has been playing out of position on the right wing, so if his numbers might be slightly better, but now he's back at left back. Traditionally, the stay-at-home defenders, aren't they? The Burnley fullbacks. Tarkovsky's the obviously one, but he costs so much more that he won't be in your plans because you're thinking about downgrading for cheap purposes. So, yeah, I think it's sort of 6-7 points, possibly with bonus or bust for Burnley defenders, and then as you said there, that's just basically meaning you're level with what you had before.
Yeah.
So yeah, hits for defenders I'm loath to do. Hits for attackers where there's more of an upside, especially if it's Sterling involved and he then handed in the armband, then I can easily justified for 1 game week. Hits for defenders more of an option, I think, over as you said there, 3-4 game week period. If you're confident that they'll hold further down the line or produce some consistent clean sheets. But yeah, 1 game week, especially 38 where there's loads of goals.
Exactly, yeah. That's why I'm kind of put off. And to be honest, I know Chelsea just put 3 past Liverpool, but I actually think Wolves is going to be a tougher test for them, even though Chelsea are going to be at home and Wolves are going to be away, obviously. I think that could be, and we've seen Sice score before. I don't think he's actually had that many shots in the box recently, but you never know. So I'm probably going to keep it like that. So yeah, that's my team. Obviously, like I said, I'll bring Neale's up just to quickly show you again before we shoot off. So yeah, I don't know. I look at my team and think, actually, do you know what? It's all right. It's all right compared to these 3 hit teams. It's not awful, at least. And players like Son, they're just not really being considered by free hitters at all. So yeah, I'm hoping they can do the business. And I think lastly, the reason I'm going for Sterling, I just think if all the players we think are going to start, David Silva, De Bruyne, Mahrez, Jesus, Sterling, if they all start, I just think I'd have the front 3 then, and all of them, they're going to get, once they're in the box, they're going to shoot. I just think that they are the best 3 for goals, simple as that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much why I'm going for them. Because on a 1 game week punt, not punt, but on a 1 game week type thing, obviously it's much easier to rack up a big score when you're getting the goals rather than the assists, although we could see a Kevin De Bruyne triple assist hat trick. You just don't know. But yeah, good luck with the free hit. I hope you can get close to 10k, top 10k. I should, as I've said all season, a lot of people have said, well, your ranks, to me this is, your rank's not great, but you were hacked. But then so was Neale, and Neale's done way better than me, so he's kind of spoiled that narrative. So yeah, good luck to everyone else. Thanks for watching this morning. If you've enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like. Subscribe if you are new around here. There's only going to be 1 more video, which is tomorrow. Actually, there's 2 more. There's Scoutcast Match Day on Sunday at 3:45, and then an end of season Scoutcast on Monday at 8 p.m. before we then start looking ahead to probably the next season. So subscribe if you're new, like if you haven't already on the video. Thanks very much, Neale.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me on. Good luck, everybody, tomorrow.
Yeah, good luck, everyone. We will catch you again soon. Cheers all.